Hey, everybody, I'm David Bloom with Next TMT here with my co-founder, Daniel Frankel, on the west side of the Los Angeles megalopolis on a relatively quiet holiday weekend that still managed to find plenty of news somehow. I'm not quite sure how that works out, but take some time off, people like me. Or actually, since I worked all weekend, I really can't say that. But anyway, Dan, in our newsletter and in our fabulous podcast to which you are now listening, a lot's going on. I think we should start. The Supreme Court wrapped up its session with agreeing for next session to take up whether ISPs get to screw or get forced to screw with us, actually, because of some changes in their liability. So talk a little bit about this case, because it could have big implications, even though we've got Section 230 in the Communications Act of whatever it was, 1996. It supposedly gives them safe harbor, blah, 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 blah.
Sony and the music labels versus Cox Communication, a privately held cable company based in Atlanta.
About to be part of Charter, or vice versa. It's kind of weird. They're going to call it Cox, right? They're going to still call it Cox after after Charter, which is bigger, quote, takes it over. I'm not, John Malone's up to something. I know that. But anyway, this is the music labels against a big privately held media companies.
Right. Litigation court fight started in 2018. The music labels sued Cox saying, hey, not for nothing, but we've been telling you for a while that your users, your broadband subscribers, are BitTorrenting and sharing, private or copyrighted IP over your network. You're enabling it, and we're suing you for $1 billion. And lo and behold, in 2019, they won a jury verdict. Were awarded $1 billion. Appeal happened last year, and now the Supreme Court is taking up the case.
I might add, the appellate court said $1 billion, kind of a ridiculous amount of damages here, guys. But
right, and they ruled that Cox didn't profit from the intellectual property violation.
They were directly making money off of this, basically.
Right, but they are in some way liable. So there are big implications if it goes the label's way. Your ISP might police you a lot more tightly. You might not even get due process. You were, sharing a video with grandma, and they perceive that to be, sharing videos that you don't own or something. And so it could be, like a lot of Supreme Court rulings these days or throughout time, pretty impactful. So
could be impactful, or could be reduced to some sideshow focused on some narrow legal listic thing that sends it back to the district court to figure out. That could also happen, because it's also a thing the Supreme Court likes to do when they really kind of want to clear things up a little bit, but don't really want to wade into the gigantic issue behind it. So we'll see what happens. But inviting your ISPs to, we already have some stuff going on allowing states now to require, if they'd like, age restriction or age certification stuff for people to go on to adult sites. That was okayed in a court decision in the last thing. So, the stuff, I think that generally speaking, the government's willingness to be hands off on internet content has shifted, and some of that's probably way overdue 30 years after the Communications Act was put in place, and holding to some extent the providers somewhat liable in some fashion for some things. So I just think the question is going to be, what is that going to be, and what are the impacts if that gets done?
Well, groups like nonprofits like Public Knowledge who are concerned about it. Quote them in the newsletter. The assumption is that there'll be overreach and abuse. So,
no, overreach and abuse.
A lot.
These words you use, I can't believe that would happen in any of this.
So what else did we get into in this?
Well, you intimated in the newsletter that us Cape kids, and I did finish high school on Cape Cod, which is a pretty nice place to be this time of year, less nice to be in January. We like to blow stuff up. And that may, in fact, be the case for some of my former schoolmates. I did not spend the holiday week blowing stuff up. I'm a pacifist. ultimately. And I've gotten rather bored, I have to confess, with most fireworks, which it turns out are going to be really expensive next year if the tariffs go in place against China, where virtually all fireworks are made these days. So I hope you guys had a good time.
Yeah.
What?
That's one consumer product, but you can jack it up to about 165%. And
yeah.
Okay, well,
we'll see what people, I mean, those are already pretty expensive. I think the New York Times had a story about a guy who lives in Maine, and he had no problem acquiring like mil-spec ordnance, but finding a legal place to set it off turned out to be a lot more complicated, even in Maine, where there's a lot of big open places to go blow stuff up. But that was not my case here in Santa Monica, where mostly I was calming the dog. I was dog sitting while my spouse was out of town for the week in a very nice resort down in San Diego County.
All animals just love you, David. Yeah. What is it?
I think it's just my winning smile. That must be it. So, but that being said, there was certainly some sounds of combat going on out there, and the dog, an incredibly chilled out Australian Labradoodle, was not that excited about that. Even jumped up on the couch, which he doesn't do, and looked stressed. So I felt for him. You
good deep dive into Skydance content.
You know, we're going to do that, but you were up on a hill watching stuff in the burned out former Eaton Canyon neighborhoods.
True. It was kind of a counterintuitive mood. You know, there was nothing to burn up there.
Right.
But, there were reports of yahoos like us.
It came pre-burned.
They were basically lighting fireworks where we always lit fireworks on what would be our good friend's deck, but it's not there anymore. It's just an excavated lot overlooking the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. Pasadena is kind of a, here, and Altadena's here, and Altadena burned back.
It turns out when your name is Altadena, you're above Dena, and they are above the Pasa part of Dena. So they're up on the hill there in the burned area with 6,000 other former houses and businesses. And
they were all charter passings, David. That's how I managed to.
That's how you wedge that in. Well, while you were doing that, I was busy watching a whole bunch of the movies that are the most watched movies on various services lately. I was just like, why don't I just catch up? Because my spouse, not interested in most of the movies that make the top 10. She is a former movie critic, former Variety bureau chief in Paris, hanging out at in Berlin and the Venice Film.
How was Carlo Vivari this year? Was it amazing?
I have no idea. This is a former. She's not been doing any of that, but she has 2 degrees in film criticism. She has an opinion about many things, including big dumb action comedies, which appear to A, be all over the top 10 lists of many of the big streaming services, and B, appear to be the main output of the man about to take control of Paramount. Now that $16 million has apparently changed hands, along with some other guarantees that will mollify the deeply wounded president, our only president.
Well, I'm going to just for 1 second. I don't mean to cut you off, but I was curious about that because Paramount came out with a statement last week, said, okay, it's finally over. We've settled with the president for $60 million, and that's it. He just wants the money. It's what we paid ABC for Stephanopoulos' thing, and it's done. And then Trump came out and said, no, I got nearly double that, 16, 20 million in the form of airtime on CBS, an agreement made with Skydance for PSA time on the network, which would
but that's after the fact. So that's basically him working both sides of the transaction to extract a payout of some kind that makes him feel better. So airtime on CBS saying Naga's great, whatever, and her paying a toll on the front end to allow the deal to go forward so that she can finish the deal before a very, very imminent deadline on a bunch of debt that has been floating our own family company, National Amusements, which has a controlling share in Paramount. So with that acquisition, presumably, though we shouldn't presume too much here, things will move ahead. Brendan Carr at the FCC is going to have to sign off. He now has a third member, so they have a quorum to make decisions on momentous things like this, but I suspect he makes no decision without the approval of the president. So I presume things will probably move along and deadlines will get adjusted and all that will happen. She will let go of her father's former empire, now much lessened, and he will take over with a long track record. I mean, I looked at these films. Yeah, I mean, I watch these films and they're entertaining enough. They definitely are audience pleasing, no doubt about it. They tend to be big action comedies or just action stuff. There's a lot of things kind of in common with them, but they've done really, really well. The question becomes, when David takes over, does he take Paramount in a direction like Skydance, which has mostly been partnered with folks?
Right.
Does it take Skydance? I call it Sky Par because I just can't help myself. Does Sky Par then become like the place that's pumping out, as Ellison did, 10 films in about 2 years, 10 major, like 9-figure films in just over 2 years? Or does he become like the big, merchant, arms merchant for all the studios, like Sony has been? What do you think?
Well, they've got pretty good distribution. I mean, are you going to divest CBS and Paramount Plus and your cable networks? There's a lot of distribution there. I mean,
no, you wouldn't divest it, but I mean, the movie part of it, which matters to one of the what used to be the big six, is still a big thing in Hollywood. So are you going to be making movies just for your own stuff to go on Paramount Plus, to go out into theaters, to then show up on the midnight movie on CBS 3 years from now, et cetera, et cetera? What are you going to do? So where do you go with
Sony? I mean, they're not like Sony is like, it makes sense that you'd have to like invest and create a distribution platform.
Yeah, Sony made a decision not to have a streaming service, and they got rid of Crackle. So yeah.
But they were kind of like leaning that way anyway. It doesn't, you Paramount Plus is actually kind of a vital organism at this point, and CBS
seems like it. You found some numbers that put it just barely south of Disney Plus in terms of regard and view time and
report. Yeah, they rank. It's like a really good sample. It's only 10,000 consumers. Usually these.
No, that's a serious sample size. Yeah, Pew does big ass. The Pew Research Center does big ass sample sizes, no doubt about it. So
and they asked
like real numbers.
American consumers, what streaming services do you use? And nearly half said Paramount Plus, just behind Disney Plus. And there's like this tier of, Amazon and Netflix is at the very top. A vast majority of adults use those services. Right. And at the bottom, you've got like Apple TV Plus, and Paramount Plus is kind of at the middle top of that spectrum. And you've invested a lot of money into some costs. It's built. Why would you run away with that?
No, I'm not saying you would get rid of stuff, but the question is, are they? Because I think Paramount had like, if you want to watch the latest season of Yellowstone or the last season of Yellowstone, you can't watch it on Paramount Plus because they shipped those rights over to Peacock, right?
Right.
And they had a bunch of other stuff. They were just busy licensing stuff all over the place. Fine. But it sort of makes it hard to take the stuff you actually created, your mountain of entertainment that you own, but don't necessarily have rights to for the moment. So I'll be curious to see how that plays out, where he goes with it. If they actually have real money there, then the thing that becomes interesting, and I cite our dear friends at Moffett-Nathanson once again, they kind of poked at the Warner Brothers Discovery split, and they said, okay, so there's going to be a 20% stake in the studios and streaming unit that will be owned by the global networks unit, which is like the people the cable networks and being put on the ice flow. So the one going on the ice flow is still going to own 20% of the one that's actually valuable with all the IP and stuff like that. But they have to sell it within a year to meet some favorable tax treatment stuff. And of course, John Malone's all about that. So therefore, David Zaslav's all about that. So they will be selling that 20% stake to somebody. And presumably, and one of the candidates that Moffett-Nathanson said is, these guys over at, Ellison may just say, okay, let's double down. Let's really kick up the library by owning 20%. And that kind of sets the price ultimately for the whole 100% of the streaming and studios division of Warner Brothers. So it could be something very, very big. Private equity would probably get in, maybe in what's left of NBC Universal, which is still quite a lot, minus their SpinCo Versant. Somebody's going to snap that up, I think. What do you think?
Yes, I mean that's what everybody's. I mean that's what in case of SpinCo, that was the whole purpose of it. It's a intermediary move to something else bigger, and
Yeah.
so yes, I think it's inevitable. I like you. I don't know what exactly it is, but
Ellison's actually got, his daddy, Larry, our friend Larry, who owns most of Carbon Beach in Malibu, most of Lanai in the Hawaiian Islands, an entire island except for like 5%. He got most of it, and a few other things here and there, like Oracle.
yeah,
May now be the world's richest man.
he
I
might
mean,
be the oligarch we were all thinking that Elon Musk would be. I mean, he's
Elon's a little too unreliable, whereas Larry, he's a sailor. He knows how to set those sails on a path and go.
I did a deep dive on some of his interviews. I was trying to put some contextual stuff in to what you wrote. And it's interesting. He talks about his first divorce, and his wife left him because he sailed too much and he wasn't ambitious enough. And he's a loser.
Your wife may know a little bit about sailing a lot, but yes, he was a loser and it worked out for him. And now if you can just get our beloved producer Vivian to go become a quarter trillionaire, think how much advertising we wouldn't have to worry about. I'm just saying she has a path she too could follow. But now that the kids are off to college,
we'll see.
You'll bring it up. I'm
going to just stay really neutral here because she's editing this. She'll hear it multiple times. And
yes.
My silence will speak.
It's well. probably for the best, that ringing silence. That being said, he's certainly showed his bona fide with Trump and one of his closer friends. And again, richest man in the world, possibly, because Oracle stock has gone through the stinking roof, even as Elon's has dropped quite a bit. Stock values for SpaceX and Tesla in particular have been off a bit since he's gotten into a tiff. Elon, of course, in two things I did not put in the newsletter, but I just want to throw out there. Elon did two things that I think may be problematic. One is they have brought AI agents in an experimental way to X, his social media site, to provide community notes. So we're going to have AI agents, if requested, generating notes about controversial posts. What could go wrong, right?
Well, I mean, you've got people who use it to sort of showcase misinformation. Hey, Grok, is this true?
Yeah, exactly. So what could go wrong? Nothing. It's going to work out great. And the other thing, of course, is this week, as he doubles down on his split with Trump, he has announced he's going to form his own political party, America's Party. And I'm just trying, I got to tell you, just like all of a sudden he's sort of blown out his natural audience for Tesla with some of the stuff of the last few months, I'm sort of wondering who the audience would be for this third party, which always struggles in the American system to find a reason to exist. So we'll be interested to see what he does with that. Anyway, throwing that out there.
Partners at Tesla, the investors community, so much money. And I think it continues. I don't think there's any joy in Tesla land over him making this announcement. I think they actually lost a key partnership over the weekend. So
yeah, that's probably not going to get better anytime soon.
I'm sure that just make fucking cars,
right. Oh, just make cars and satellites and rockets and satellite phones and solar panels and solar batteries. Just do that. That's 6, 7, 8 things. Oh, and then tunnels in the ground. Just do all that. That should keep you busy.
As the owner of an electric car, a Hyundai Ioniq and not a Tesla, I am disappointed that we're going in reverse on that technology. I think the Chinese are going to lap us, and we'll be really sorry about that. But that's
it's going to be a real problematic pivot point, I think. But, I got this feeling, I got this impulse almost, this Laura Ingraham impulse to just tell him, in LeBron style, Elon, just shut up and make stuff,
Yeah.
We don't care about your political stuff, really. We really don't care. Just shut up and make stuff. But I don't think he's going to listen to me because no one else does. But this beloved audience that we've already built up to such gargantuan size. So that being said, you, I think, in a fit of honorable,
I did something honorable.
You did, and it was great. It took me a minute to get over it, but you said, "Hey, it's time to play a requiem for Squid Game, the most consequential, certainly international show, probably period, in America, but certainly on Netflix. And it has really changed the game for Netflix and for Korean production as a whole, which was already coming up before Squid Game came along. Parasite won an Oscar, et cetera, et cetera. Bong Joon-ho's done a lot of great stuff. But $2.5 billion in production dollars don't go into Korea without Squid Game being the biggest thing in the world. And the third and final season just came out, and you had some things to say. So please rhapsodize about this powerful.
Well, I must confess, I'm not one of the denizens. I watched some of the first season. I thought it was kind of cool, but I didn't get, in your words, rhapsodize as many others did. But I, have been immersed for a long time at Next TV. We wrote about the weekly Netflix ratings, and the numbers that it produced are just astounding. I mean, nothing, I guess Wednesday and a few other original series, rank up there, but across 3 different seasons, it's held up pretty well. The third iteration didn't do quite as well with the critics. They said, I think it was a 78 on Rotten Tomatoes. Folks
but say still pretty good. Got to say, still pretty good. Not bad.
I'm not fluent in the names of Korean filmmakers, but he was told by the New York Times, well, for 2 and 3, you had to surprise us after pulling a rabbit out of the hat in season 1, and
after surprising even Netflix, because they thought, hey, this is going to be pretty good in Korea, and it did really, really well in Korea. And they said, okay, well, let's do it like East Asia. And it's like it did really, really well in East Asia, and it's like, well, let's get a little bit bigger. And it's like, holy crap, it's like big everywhere, right? I mean, that was the first season. So that surprised everybody, including Netflix, except for like some dude in the Netflix offices in Seoul. So,
it's a cultural phenomenon that changed the video business. You don't get Netflix spending $2.5 billion in Korea without that show. So it deserves a requiem. And it didn't end on a bad note. I think for the most part, people seem to enjoy it. It generated nearly 400 million viewing hours on the platform last week on Netflix globally. So yeah, it's passing. There won't be a season 4, I guess. It should be noted.
No, it is passing. Yeah, I think they kind of said 3 of these is enough horses to beat into the ground, or shoot. But did great. On to the next cool thing, whatever it may be. Another thing on Netflix that I watched, and I was deeply disappointed about this. This is a Skydance project, and I was deeply disappointed. Was the second version of, or the second episode of, or the sequel. Let's try that one, to The Old Guard, which was a really interesting take on superhero tropes, starring Charlize Theron, who turns out is a pretty damn good action hero. She's a big strapping woman. I mean, she's a former model, but she's like 5'10", 5'11", and she's right. Even at 49, good and very compelling and great first movie. Came out during the pandemic. Awesome, really interesting take on stuff. Little queer friendly. It's like, oh, didn't see that coming. That's kind of fun, and just more generally playing with a lot of interesting ideas. Took them 5 years to get version 2.0 out. I was really looking forward to it when it came out. It was, I think, #1 on Netflix's list this week for at least a while. On movies, not series like Squid Game. But I just thought it was a mess. Now, the New York Times liked it. So, the New York Times, obviously much smarter than I am. But
that genre has been so examined over the last 10 years. I think it's hard to create something that will surprise and delight the audience. They've been
right, particularly on the sequel. But they spent a lot of time in the sequel setting up the sequel to the sequel, and that was kind of annoying. They do have, and this is amusing, they have a new baddie, a new villainess. The villain, we'll just go non-gender specific. A new villain played by Uma Thurman, wielding a katana, just like she's still in Kill Bill with Quentin Tarantino. So there you go. They're not beyond a few visual references that are kind of amusing. And we'll see what they do with it now that it's going to be a Skypar project next, I'm sure.
And as we both talked about, Shonda Rhimes had a rare, I think, was this her first Netflix miss?
I don't think it's a miss. I think that the problem is
audience-wise
in the name. Right in the name. It's a very enjoyable, The Residence, but it's right in the name, The Residence. So if you're doing a murder mystery set in the White House residence, which is the part where the president and his family lives,
right?
How many like staff members are you going to kill off in one of the most secure places in the planet? Probably not that many. It's probably hard to do sequels to that, but you got this great character like Agatha Christie, or my spouse was talking about the time she interviewed Rex Stout, the man behind Nero Wolfe, another famous mid-century fictional detective, and her memories of talking with him in upstate New York. She wrote a profile about him. These characters are, they're in a thing, and then they're in a different thing with a different name on it, and then a different thing with the brand is not the name like The Residence. The brand is Uzo Aduba's fantastic, slightly bonkers, but super interesting, quirky, funny super detective. Cordelia.
Crazy Eyes from Orange is the New Black.
She is well past the crazy eyes. Though technically, again, Cordelia Cup, a little nutty, but really fun. Really fun. That was the funniest murder mystery I've watched in a long time.
Yes, she's fantastic.
And I don't think that character dies with the chief of staff of the White House. I think it becomes, and as I mentioned in the newsletter, my secret hope is she pops up in a cross-universe appearance in Mike White's The White Lotus in the next season, investigating whoever ends up dead in the first episode.
That was a good idea. Maybe somebody will read that. And
hey, I want total credit, and I need at least a WGA credit out of that one because I think it's a brilliant idea personally.
Earned.
Not hold my breath on it, but it could be great. It could be great.
We watched a lot of TV over the break. What else is going on? I thought this was really kind of savvy of Charter and Chris Winfrey, given the level of
what's been a pretty long list for him of pretty savvy moves in the last 2 years, right? He's done well.
I know we glaze him too much in this platform, and I'll stop after this. He has kind of glommed up, when in Rome with the new administration, constant danger, constant law and order. And in the San Fernando Valley, where I was gestated, all right, where I grew up, copper theft of old like DSL networks, et cetera, any kind of telecom product is rampant, and they're not doing enough to stop it. So Charter puts out this press release after the latest, they had like 13 or 14 cables cut that took out service for thousands of customers.
2,600 customers, which is something, but not.
Right. Declared it an
This is not 0 day. It's not shutting down the nation or even the San Fernando Valley.
But they declared an act of terrorism. They put out a press release.
Domestic terrorism. Let's be clear here. Domestic terrorism.
Right. So, and the LAPD says, what? You're high. Don't say that. That's not what it is. It's just guys looking for precious metals to sell to buy beer.
Yeah, it's not my big plot here. These geniuses that are stealing available copper wire to resell it or
right, but it's all over local news. You say domestic terrorism, they say how high.
Well, again, you know what? As somebody who's been in the news business off and on for a very long time, this is the kind of story that doesn't get more than 10 minutes of attention in October, but on a holiday week like this one, it is front page, lead the news on broadcast. It's all we got. It's all we've got.
Well, and the cry is for more, hey, law enforcement, do something about this. And if you've got every, 5 o'clock news in the nation looking at it, they might get something done with this. So I thought it was kind of a smart move.
Well, the humanity involved in losing your internet service even for a day, it's just brutal to think about. So we'll all say a prayer. I thought about offering a penny for your thoughts about the copper cable theft, but pennies are too expensive now. So I didn't.
Yeah, that's what Vivian told me. So.
Yeah. Yeah, but it does leap to mind quickly. They're even getting rid of pennies, so that tells you how expensive pennies are now. One little thing that I think is really important as we kind of start to wrap this
Yes,
up.
I culminated my binge of The Affair. It's done. Is that what you're
Thank
going
God. Talk
to
about sparing humanity further.
Just wanted to keep the streak alive.
Yeah, yeah. When you bring it up in September, I'm going to beat you. Okay. So,
Okay, stop here.
anyway, so the really interesting thing in niche online streaming, Oak Tree Capital Management, pretty big private equity firm, bought FilmRise, which was very smart back in the day. Danny, I can't remember his last name, but Danny, the guy behind FilmRise, snapped up a bunch of who thought they had any value libraries of like 1950s westerns,
Yeah, I was smart.
chopped them all up into fast channels focused on, 50s westerns, and populated those channels across every streaming platform from here to eternity, which is probably also in there too. Really smart. So Oaktree buys them, folds them in with Shout, which has roots back to the old Rhino Records days.
Sure.
The brothers who founded it and back in the day founded Rhino, which was doing all these wonderful, cool reissues of music. And then they
Did
got
pretty
bought
well
by
with
one.
DVD too. I mean, they had
Yeah, and
like
then they got into DVDs, but they got bought out by Warner Music, and then they went out and did basically the same thing, Rhino without the Rhino horn, called Shout, and we're still doing these great reissues of box sets of music, and then also box sets of like classic TV. And obviously there's some issues there, but they had rights, and they started to have their own production studio to wrap shows around the library they had. Well, they've now picked up FilmRise and all of its distribution to go with Shout. And no shock, private equity firm wants to take this little roll up and make it a bigger ball as the place for the independent, quote, the independent distributor of choice for content owners and platforms. I think this could be a big deal. The folks that I deal with routinely in places like OTT.X conferences, at DEG conferences, things like that, those people, and Stream TV, where we were, a lot of those folks are all going to be going, oh,
sometimes I get an idea at an upcoming conference. We'll do a panel on fast.
yeah,
And we'll get
right.
a bunch of people who do different things that have nothing to talk about with each other, and we'll stick them all together, and we'll have you moderate.
No, what we're going to do is take that and make that its own fast channel.
If I
So
have to see one more fast panel, I don't know what I'll do.
I think you're going to be good in about 6 months. But the point is that is just like people used to have, cable channels on the box. Once you got on the box, it was hard to get you off the box until, disaster hit the entire industry and they started killing things off. But you were holding space, really, and that became your distribution for whatever you had, whatever content you had that you could wrap ads around.
Right.
In the same way, Fast has now become that on Samsung TV Plus and, Roku and Amazon Channel, all those things. And yeah, it's a little more rigor in terms of killing things off and things going in and out, but it is distribution. And so you've got that distribution plus production plus a 70,000 title library. That starts to look like a little mini studio. It's not quite even Lionsgate, but it's not nothing. And if you start, maybe you pick up Versant because you're Oak Tree and you got the resources to do that. For instance, it could get interesting. And so I just wanted to note that and say, stay tuned, because that's the entirely appropriate verb to use to see where this goes.
Yeah, keep watching it.
Yeah.
Stay vigilant.
And one more thing, Netflix is taking over. It's not taking over, but it's going to be carrying NASA Plus, the streaming service from NASA.
Oh,
So
right.
kind of cool, really. So, and you were right up the street there in Altadena, right above the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, where so much of the great research in rocketry has been going on for the last 70 or 80 years. But that being said, NASA Plus will carry things like rocket launches live. So that's another way for Netflix to hone its skill.
I thought Elon Musk had their business now.
No, he does some things for them. That's true. He contracts with them for delivery of like heavy stuff. He's got a heavy rocket, but I think they're still doing some stuff too. So
Yeah.
they like, they were trying to get more capacity than they had, and contracting out was a way to deal with some of that. And we'll see how long Elon's contracts continue with NASA.
Name didn't come up last week. Brendan Carr was in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, which he identified. It turns out that San Francisco is not the real SF. It's Sioux Falls.
Yeah. Well, that's what most people, even in Sioux Falls, say, right? So the real SF.
He gives a little, he wanks. Family-friendly podcast here. He gives a little shout out, actually several of them, to Trump, and he does his usual, MAGA stuff. But I thought his policy download was the first time he gave the whole kitchen sink policy. It's a 4,000 word, 30-minute dissertation. It's included in our newsletter. We have the video.
Right. And don't miss that. But at least you get an idea where the guy's coming from, right? And some of it you didn't necessarily dislike, right?
Well, I mean, some of and you've said this before, some of the delete, some of the old policy in regards to cable distribution, to broadband, to broadcast is obsolete, and you do wonder why it's still on the books. So will he overreach with the purging? Probably so, but
you can put some money on that, I think. But
there is some level of coherent reasoning for getting rid of some of this stuff. I think it is restrictive and slowing things down. So it's actually an interesting talk. If you can get through the first, kind of obsequious first 15 minutes.
The performative stuff. Yeah. Thankfully, we're not about performative. We're just about us and Next TMT Talks and everything that's happening in streaming and media and technology and telecom. And with that, I think we should probably wrap this puppy up for the week. It's been a quiet week, but not one we found nothing to talk about. There's lots of good stuff out there. I will recommend Heads of State on Amazon, a quite amusing, if inch deep, action comedy where John Cena demonstrates his capabilities as a comic actor once again. And Idris Elba demonstrates why Idris Elba needs to be the next James Bond. So,
Heads of State on Amazon.
There you go. Check it out. It's worth. It's nothing deep, but they do make a really good case for preserving the NATO alliance, and I do not mean the National Association of Theater Owners, the other NATO. So there you go. Anyway, Daniel, thank you. Have a great post fourth. Don't blow any hands off. And on to the next adventure.